Most of us grew up with a simple story about Thanksgiving. We learned it in school. We saw it in movies. The story goes like this. The Pilgrims came to America on the Mayflower. They had a hard first year. The Native Americans helped them. Then, they all sat down for a big feast. They ate turkey and gave thanks. It's a nice story. It makes us feel good. But is this story true? Well, not really. The real story is more complex. It's not as simple as we've been told. There are parts that are true. There are also parts that are myths. The first Thanksgiving was not just a happy feast. It was part of a complex relationship. The Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people needed each other, but they also didn't fully trust each other. The Pilgrims had just arrived in a new land. They didn't know how to survive there. The Wampanoag had lived there for thousands of years. They knew the land well. The Wampanoag helped the Pilgrims. They taught them how to grow crops. They showed them which plants were safe to eat. Without this help, the Pilgrims might not have survived. But the Wampanoag had their own reasons for helping. They had lost many people to disease. They wanted allies against other native groups. The image of Pilgrims and Native Americans sitting down to a peaceful feast is a myth. It's a nice picture, but it's not accurate. The reality was more complicated. Yes, there was a feast, but it wasn't planned as a celebration of friendship. It started as a harvest celebration for the Pilgrims. The Wampanoag joined later. The Wampanoag didn't come because they were invited. They came because they heard gunfire. They thought there might be trouble. When they arrived, they found the Pilgrims celebrating. The Pilgrims were shooting guns into the air. This was part of their celebration, but to the Wampanoag, it sounded like a threat. They came ready for possible conflict. When we think of Thanksgiving dinner, we usually think of turkey. We imagine Pilgrims and Native Americans sharing this big bird. But the truth is, turkey might not have been the main dish at the first Thanksgiving. The menu was probably very different from what we eat today. We need to look at what food was available in New England in 1621. The Pilgrims wrote about the feast. They mentioned fowl, but this could have been many types of birds. It might have included ducks, geese, or even eagles. Venison was definitely on the menu. The Wampanoag brought 5 deer as a gift. Seafood was also likely part of the meal. The Pilgrims lived near the coast. They could easily catch fish and shellfish. Vegetables were important too. The Pilgrims grew peas, beans, and squash. They relied heavily on what they could grow and harvest themselves. The Native Americans taught the Pilgrims how to cultivate the land, which was crucial for their survival. So the first Thanksgiving was a blend of both cultures, sharing and learning from each other. Traditional dishes like corn, beans, and squash were staples. The feast was a celebration of the harvest and the cooperation between the two groups. Today, our Thanksgiving tables may look different, but the spirit of sharing and gratitude remains the same. Section 5. Pilgrim fashion. Not just black and white. Many of us picture pilgrims wearing black clothes with white collars. We imagine them with big buckles on their hats and shoes. But you know, this image is wrong. It's actually based on paintings from much later. The real pilgrims dressed quite differently. Their clothes were more colorful and practical. Pilgrims wore many colors. They liked earth tones like brown, green, and russet. They also wore brighter colors like red and blue. Black was for special occasions. It was expensive and hard to make. Most pilgrims couldn't afford to wear it every day. White collars were also for special times. They were a sign of wealth and status. Section 6. The Wampanoag perspective. We often hear about Thanksgiving from the Pilgrims' point of view, focusing on their journey, struggles, and eventual success. But what about the Wampanoag? Their story is equally significant and deserves to be told. Their side of the story is just as important, offering a deeper understanding of the historical events. The Wampanoag had lived in the area for thousands of years, long before the Pilgrims arrived. They had their own rich culture, traditions, and way of life that were deeply connected to the land. The arrival of the Pilgrims changed everything for them, bringing both new opportunities and significant challenges. We need to understand their perspective to get the full story, to see how their lives were impacted. The Wampanoag had already faced big challenges before the Pilgrims came, including conflicts and environmental changes. European traders had visited their shores, bringing goods but also unforeseen consequences. These traders brought diseases that the Wampanoag had never seen before, leading to devastating outbreaks. Many Wampanoag died from these diseases, which decimated their population and left communities in mourning. Their population was much smaller when the Pilgrims arrived, making them more vulnerable. This made them more open to an alliance with the newcomers, seeing it as a potential means of survival. Usamaquin, also known as Massasoit, was the Wampanoag leader who played a crucial role during this period. He decided to help the Pilgrims, forging a relationship that would shape the future of both peoples. Section 7. From Harvest Celebration to National Holiday. The first Thanksgiving in 1621 was not the start of a yearly tradition. It was a one-time event. The Pilgrims didn't plan to do it every year. In fact, they had many days of Thanksgiving. These were religious observances, not feasts. They were held whenever something good happened. The idea of an annual Thanksgiving came much later. Different colonies had their own Thanksgiving days. These were not all on the same date. They were not celebrated the same way. Some were feasts. Others were days of prayer. During the American Revolution, the Continental Congress declared several Thanksgiving days. These were to celebrate victories in the war. Section 8. The role of Sarah Josepha Hale. Sarah Josepha Hale played a big role in making Thanksgiving a national holiday. Her efforts were tireless and spanned many years. She was a writer and editor, known for her influential work in the literary world. She is sometimes called the Godmother of Thanksgiving, a title that reflects her significant contributions. Hale believed that a national Thanksgiving holiday could help unite the country, especially during times of division. She worked for many years to make this happen, showing remarkable dedication and perseverance. Her story shows how one person can change a nation's traditions and leave a lasting legacy. Hale wrote about Thanksgiving in her magazine, Godey's Lady's Book, which was widely read. This was a popular magazine for women, offering a variety of content. She published recipes and stories about Thanksgiving, helping to shape the holiday's traditions. She wrote editorials asking for a national holiday, using her platform to advocate for change. She did this every year for 17 years, showing her unwavering commitment. Hale helped create many of the Thanksgiving traditions we know today. Hale didn't just write, she took action. She also wrote letters to politicians, urging them to support her cause and make Thanksgiving a national holiday. Section 9. Thanksgiving Traditions, Old and New. Thanksgiving traditions have changed a lot over time. Some are very old, others are quite new. The idea of gathering with family is old. The Pilgrims did this, but many of our other traditions came later. We need to look at how Thanksgiving has changed. This helps us understand how holidays evolve. The Thanksgiving meal has changed a lot. Turkey became the main dish in the 1800s. Before that, people ate whatever meat was available. Pumpkin pie became popular in the mid-1800s. Cranberry sauce came even later. These foods are now central to Thanksgiving. Section 10. Reflecting on history. Why it matters. Understanding the real story of Thanksgiving is important. It helps us see history more clearly. The simple story we often hear leaves out a lot. It doesn't show the full picture. When we learn the facts, we can appreciate the holiday more. We can also think about what it means to different people. This kind of reflection is valuable. Learning about Thanksgiving teaches us about history. We see how stories change over time. We learn how myths are created. We also see how real events are more complex than simple stories. This helps us think critically about other parts of history. We learn to ask questions. We learn to look for different perspectives.